Hi everyone, welcome to your first games development lesson. What I want you to do for your starter today is I want you to try and list as many different game types as you can. So if you haven't already done so, go and grab yourself a notebook or a jotter and pause the video, write them down and come back when you're finished. Okay, hopefully you've got a nice extensive list of different game types. You didn't cheat too much by going onto the internet. What I want to do is talk about today's lesson and then we'll see how we can bring these back in. Okay, so the purpose of today's lesson is to focus on game types. We are going to look at a variety of different game types, and hopefully by the end of the lesson you'll be successful if you can list these, describe different game types, and then compare some similarities between games within game types. Okay, I've kind of presented this so everyone gets the same information, but you will be able to do a different level of work based on if you're doing level 4, level 5, or level 6. Okay, so that says, did you name the common ones? I'm aware you can't see that because it's behind my head, right? But did you name the common ones? So let's talk through what the most common game types are and what they actually mean. Okay, so first one is MMO, massive multiplayer online games. Now, basically, these are usually played through a LAN, a local area network connection, or usually the internet. Okay, you're playing online against real people. Sometimes it's in real time. It happens. It's online all the time. People jump on it whenever they're not at work. It can be really involving. People get really addicted to it, and it is they're huge programs that have taken hours of creation to make them. And they can be based on anything, they could be space related, Wild West related, just whatever it is that people are interested in. Or they can have multiple different worlds and you can choose where to stay. The next one is simulations. Now, simulations run from the kind of the fun and the quirky right the way through to real and realistic. So we have things like Farmville, where you're simulating running your own farm. You've got Goat Simulator, all the kind of weird ones. You've got your kind of ones in the middle that mimic real life, like Sims. And then you've obviously got your real life kind of strategy ones, which are, like flight simulators and space simulators that astronauts and stuff actually use to practice what it's going to be like going into those environments. Okay. The common things about simulators is that usually they have a lot of customizability. There's not any kind of real narrative to the stories. They're usually free playing. You can play them to your heart's content, and they're kind of like sandbox, and you could just do what you want to do, and yeah, and play the games. Next one is adventure. Adventure is usually set in sort of a fantasy or adventure land of kind of some place. They can be based on loads of different things. They're usually some sort of puzzle or mission that you have to complete or somebody you have to save. Um, and then you kind of, once you've completed each puzzle, you move on to each level until you get to your kind of end narrative or mission, whatever that may be. We've got real-time strategy, so this is when people are playing against each other in like real time. There's not any sort of like player turns as such. You're all kind of playing at the same time. There's one kind of mission or goal. You sometimes work together as a team to try and achieve that. Usually played online on the internet or in sort of like Xbox Live type atmospheres as well. Okay, puzzle has become really famous nowadays because of the use of smartphones. Okay, so these are small games that usually are just sort of time wasters. There's not a huge amount of programming to them. They can be based on simple shapes or puzzles or movements, and they have no real end game. You just keep playing them. They add more levels all the time. And you just keep going. Examples of that would be things like Candy Crush. People play words games on their phones. Fruit Ninja, even simple controls, simple movements, and continual gameplay. Time wasters, basically. Okay, action. Action can get kind of mixed up with some of the other ones we're going to talk about. But basically, what action is it's fast paced. So you're controlling a character. It's all about really fast gameplay. It's sometimes quite often kind of based on things like fighting. You pick your character usually, and then you go in and you perform or the actions or do whatever it is as part of the game. Okay, stealth shooter is kind of similar to combat and action and stuff as well, but it's more based on stealth stealth scenarios. So for example, a couple of games I can think of would be things like Thief or Prisoner of War, where you're trying to escape somewhere or you're trying to get into somewhere. It's all very kind of quiet and scary, and you've got to try and complete things against the clock or without people seeing you, is a little bit more, you have to think a little bit more. There's less action and more kind of tenseness. Okay, combat, again, quite similar to action. You tend to pick your characters, it's very fast paced. If you're thinking of things like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, then usually you have to practice a really long time to be able to get to the stage where you can use all of the really complex controls that are required for each of the different fighting styles and the different characters and things. Okay, so that's kind of what combat is. Okay, first player shooter is probably one of the ones that all of you have got on your list. Okay, it's where you are kind of seeing through the eyes of the protagonist of the program. I suppose the main downfall of a first player shooter or first person shooter game is that you don't get to see yourself. It's really realistic and you feel embedded into the world because you're effectively looking through your own eyes, but you don't get to see your character, what they look like, what they're dressed in. It's more about the immersiveness of the game that you're playing. And first player shooter is probably one of the oldest game types, right back to when you go back to like Doom and Duke Nukem and stuff. It's very it's always stayed the same. There's a lot of similarities throughout the years. Okay, sports is a really wide range because I suppose you would really include driving and stuff in here as well, okay? Now sometimes it's a narrative, so you could be taking on a person's career and trying to build up, and the game will get more complex as you get better abilities, or it could be based around a sporting event, so even something as simple as Mario Olympics. You can play all of the different games within the Olympic setting. So they can be very different sports, also depending on what type of device you're using it with, a Wii versus an Xbox or a Switch or whatever. You can play the games all really differently. Okay, and there's a lot of extra extensions and controllers that you can get to play with sports type games. Okay, RPG, is when you are playing a game that's got a really, really big narrative. Okay, so it could be that you are, you're a particular character. You usually got a lot of maybe customization potentially about your character, but the biggest thing is you've got narrative. There's a story. You can make choices. It will affect the gameplay. Some of the RPG games are mixed in with other things. So they might be mixed in with adventure, mixed in with puzzle, mixed in with stealth, simulation, etc. To think of a couple, you've got Life is Strange, which is really just a story-based system, and the choices you make will impact the story that you get. Or you can get something a bit more, complex, like Red Dead Redemption, where you're playing a single character and you move through his life, and you make choices, and it opens different options within the game, or makes different endings and things happen. So RPG again a really big seller nowadays. And the last one is educational. Probably not one of the ones that we play the most. Maybe you've not got it on your list, one you've not thought of, but it is really powerful. I remember one of the earliest computer games that I was ever addicted to was called Zumbinis. And I suppose it was like an older version of a sum dog nowadays, really, where you would have to do mathematic calculations, and from that you would be able to use your Zumbinis, which were kind of like lemmings, I suppose, and you could get them to do things and solve puzzles and move through, make choices, edit, customize, all that type of stuff. The main purpose of these types of games is to teach you something. So brain training, just trying to you build on your IQ. They're usually based around maths or logic and that type of stuff, so that you're learning whilst also enjoying yourself and having fun. Okay, so this brings us on to what today's task actually is. Now, all three of the tasks for level 4, 5 and 6 are very similar. Now, it doesn't matter if you're not quite sure what your level is yet. Remember, my advice was that if you did National 4 or maybe haven't done computing before, you're in S5, then you're going to be at level 4. If you've done National 5, you're probably thinking about level 5, and if you've done level 5 already, then you're thinking about level 6. Okay, so just think about what you've done in computing already. If you haven't done computing, then have a go at level 4, try to add on the level 5 stuff, and we'll just see how you get on. Okay, so for level 4, basically what your task is to do is, from those 12 common game types that I've just mentioned, I want you to choose 3 of them. Okay, and my advice would be is pick 3 that are really different. So if you're going to go for action, don't also pick combat and stealth, because they're quite similar. How about picking like a role-playing game and adventure and educational? Okay, try to make one outside of your comfort zone, so it's not something you could just write about because you know about it. One that you've maybe games that you don't usually play, so you have to do a bit of research. Okay, so choose 3 game types, write a description for each. Now, a description should be a paragraph to sort of half an A4 page. I don't want you just to copy and paste it off the internet. Use different sources and put it into your own words. Once you've got the information about your game type, you're then going to list 2 different games that come under that game type. Okay, and then underneath that, I want you to say 1 similarity and 1 difference. Okay, so for example, for one of the game types, what I might say is I'm going to look at platformers. So I produce an A4 document. I've got a paragraph at the top about what platformers is and what they are. Underneath that, I've got 2 games. I've listed Mario and Donkey Kong as my 2 different games. Underneath that, I'm putting down 1 similarity and 1 difference. So my similarity is that both of these games, the aim of the game is to try and save the princess at the end. Okay, Mario is trying to save Princess Peach, and then in Donkey Kong, effectively is trying to do the same thing, is get to the end, get the princess, save him from the monkey. Okay. The differences between them is that Mario is a side platformer game, so we go from left to right and we're trying to get to the end to save the princess, whereas in Donkey Kong you're travelling up the way. They're still platforms, but you're moving up the platforms to try and get to the top. Okay, so that's what you're doing, but you need to do that for 3 game types, not just 1, as I've demonstrated. If you're level 5, what you're doing is the exact same thing, but the level of complexity you're adding to that is you're also adding on common features for your games. Okay, so listen, 3 game types, 2 games under each one, and then common features. So the example I've used here is first player shooter. Okay, there's 3 different games there. Doom, which is really old, we've got Call of Duty, and then Genesis, which is a space-based one. Every single one, if you look at them, you can see the similarity in the camera angle. You're always looking through the protagonist's eyes. You can see the hand or the weapon you've currently got equipped. Sometimes you get extra information around the user interface. So things like that is what I want you to draw out, what similarities there are. And it might help if you want to put some pictures and stuff in there to help explain what it is you've been looking for. And remember, you're doing that 3 times over for 3 different game types. Okay, level 6 is obviously yours going to be a bit more difficult. Okay, so what you guys are going to do is you're going to pick 3 game types. You're going to put 2 games under each one, the same as the other 2 levels. Okay, you're going to describe those common features, game modes, camera angles, controls that might be similar, same as what the level 5s are doing. But the extra bit that you guys are adding on is where this comes into from a hardware perspective. So what consoles or devices are these usually used on? Are they usually desktop, really complex controls? Are they something that's maybe used on a Wii where they've got really simplistic controls? Are they usually used on a phone? Or if it's a puzzle game, for example, why are they usually used on a phone? Okay, is it an Xbox? Is it various games consoles? And also, what input and output devices work with them? Okay, an example would be if you did go for puzzle games and you were talking about they're specifically used on smartphones. The reason for that would be that they're most commonly used with input devices. Why? Input devices on smartphones, touchscreen. Okay, why is touchscreen good for Candy Crush? Well, it's really simple movements. If you're on a mouse, it would be a lot more complex to play because you'd have to move your mouse to the specific part of the screen that you wanted to move. Okay, whereas just swiping your phone up and down using the touchscreen makes these games really quick, really addictive, and simple to use. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. So effectively, all of you are handing in 3 kind of pages, if you like, 3 reports on 3 different game types, each with a different level of complexity on them, depending on what level you think you're going for. Okay, you can hand them in as 3 separate documents if you prefer, or one with 3 pages or whatever. It doesn't matter if you go for pages. Okay, these are the ones you have to pick from, so remember to pause the video, go away and have a little think about which game type you want to pick. Remember, pick 3 and try to go for ones which are different from each other to make your job a little bit easier. You will need the internet to do a little bit of research because I'm not expecting you to know all of this stuff already. Okay? And lastly, what I want you to do is just to have a little bit of a reflection on what you've learned. Okay, so were you able to list a different variety of game types? Were you able to describe them? Hopefully you've done that after you've done the task. And were you able to compare similarities between the games? And that will be at a different complexity level depending on whether you completed the work for level 4, level 5, or level 6. I look forward to seeing what you come up with and which game types you pick, and I hope you have a really good week. See you later. Bye.